So I think that the individual who consciously wants to escape from the oppression that's both internal and external needs to answer three questions. The first one is juridical in a way. By what right can I escape? Do I have the right to leave behind the family system? Do I have the right to change my life? Do I have the right to kill an identity that was put into me as an operating system that would cause me to have the delusion that I'm related to these other egos and that I owe them something and that I should follow the orders of this meaningless capitalist system without complaint? By what right do I complain? By what right do I challenge? By what right do I secede from the system and enter into my own independent territory? By what right, and then of course, with what strength? Do I have the strength to make the decision, to leave behind the system, to go it on my own? Do I have the strength to hold out when the system's temptations and jouissances are no longer being offered? Or will I collapse back into wanting a more comfortable life at the cost of my own truthfulness to my own spirit? Do I have the strength to deal with the consequences that I may have to face by leaving behind an oppressive system that is globalized, planetary, in which the meaning of my rebellion will not be understood or supported? Do I have the strength to survive in complete isolation and alienation from a world that will not give its approval and recognition of the right to that freedom that will bring one into an abandonment of a dying and meaningless world in order to bring new life, new love, new power, new truths, new creativity into the world. But can I do that? And what skill will be needed in order to be able to pull it off? And do I have those skills, or am I kidding myself? Am I trying to do this prematurely? There's a timing issue when one wants to produce a revolution. You'd better have your abilities all developed enough to be able to manage the backlash of the effect of one's rebelling against the system, and the vacuum that one will have to face of loneliness and of inability to communicate who one is, or to be able to make connections until one finds at least enough other rebels with the same cause or causelessness that there can be a sense that another world is possible. So I think that these questions trouble most people who aren't able to either find the answer, do I have the right to separate, and do I have the strength to do it, and do I have the skill to be able to lead a life without compromise or collapse, or fall into some kind of addictive requirement of support that oppresses and enslaves even more than the original system did, so that one is not really any better off. One has changed masters, but one is still a slave. So this is what I think is the situation that most people are dealing with in their minds and their hearts. and people are looking desperately for an alternative lifestyle and way of living. But to make a commitment to that requires tremendous inner strength and having the ability to talk back to superego voices that would attack one and belittle one and delegitimize one's sense of having a right to a better life, a higher level of existence in a vibrational field of consciousness beyond the ego, or at least in a state in which one is able to discern the difference between coercion and love and the raising of consciousness versus the putting down of the desire for growth and development of consciousness. So, in order to do this, one needs a ground. One needs a ground to stand on that isn't the ground of the system. One has to have a place, a reality, a way of understanding what is happening that is consistent, that can answer the questions that come up on a constant basis and enable the ongoing development of one's revolutionary project. Without that kind of conscious understanding of what one is doing in one's life, and with a larger strategic recognition of what is going to be required 10 steps ahead in this chess game, and an understanding of what skills, what strengths, what rules, what principles, etc., are going to be required, what allies, and what situations and what conditions. One has to be able to think all of that out in a very intelligent way if one's going to escape. You won't escape just by trying to jump into chakra 7 and I have no preferences and I'm living in the emptiness. That won't be the real emptiness. One has to first of all create one's own ground of power that functions in the world in order to then be able to transcend the ground, all right? If you want to get off the ground, first you have to have the ground. But who has a strong, consistent ground these days? And doesn't one ultimately have to be comfortable with groundlessness as one's ground? And it's this that one is going to have to deal with, the oscillation between ground and groundlessness. And these two will have to be integrated into a ground that is both solid and empty at the same time, so that your own consciousness literally will be able to walk on water or on midair and to not fall, to not collapse. And that requires an independence from the thoughts and projections of other beings. So if one has the ground, then one will develop, or one has the ability then to develop the vertical dimension. And Deleuze calls that the transcendental principle. I think it's fine. This is once you know who you are, what you want, what your reality is, and you have proven to yourself that you can live in an immanent plane of consistency without without your understanding suddenly exploding in chaos, but that you can manage logically to deal with whatever situations arise in your space. You will have then the courage and the strength to be able to move forward into the unknown. But once you have created a kind of territory for yourself, in which now you're able to develop lines of flight and of alliances and agreements and networks of strength and of complementarity, then what you need to have is a principle that enables you to offer a consistent order to others. There has to be a capacity for power sharing, for the distribution of territories, for the recognition of the rights of the other, for creating a non-oppressive oasis of a revolutionary system that does not duplicate the oppressive tendencies that had been imposed upon you. So in order to do that, you have to be free of any of the traces of that oppressive superego voice that will then want to oppress the other, even though it's not your conscious intention to do so. But those tendencies have to have been eliminated, and the tendencies of fear of being oppressed. So there has to be a way of creating an order that is modular and molecular and that can invite others to join, and that is able to grow in an organic and superorganismic way that gives everyone an ability who wants to be part of a different system, a revolutionary system, to share the same transcendental principle, which may be that of a sophiocracy. It may be that of a chain of command based on wisdom and compassion and love and intelligence in the service of the whole. That kind of an outlook that will require the development of certain skills by the members of whatever revolutionary commune begins to develop to be able to function, let's say, intersystemically and a level of interbeing, to use Thich Nhat Hanh's phrase, so that there is an ability for independence and interdependence, and all subservient, let's say, to a principle of non-duality, of unity of consciousness that transcends differences, but that respects the differences and the uniqueness of each being, and their skills and their powers and their weaknesses, their needs to grow and their needs for structure and of guidance and development. And one has to have both the patience and the curriculum and the methodology to be able to bring everyone up to speed if you're going to produce a commune of Robin Hood and his merry men, or whatever other form. And so then you're going to have the empirical principle in place. So, in other words, everything that we have gained so far in our attempt to produce a revolutionary situation is based on philosophy and on psychology. We have to have a consistent ground. We have to have purified our own consciousness of its own oppressive tendencies, or its masochistic tendencies, or its blind spots. It's lack of self-honoring, its lack of capacity to overcome the lower death drive and the lower three chakras that want narcissistic power and jouissance and security that are not available in a revolutionary situation. So what we need is the empirical skill to deal with day-to-day, moment-to-moment challenges and decisions that have to be made. This is very different from the philosophical peace of mind and capacity to think strategically. This is about thinking tactically. And tactics and strategy are two different skill sets and levels of thinking that are required. And in order to be able to pull that off, one is going to have a great insight into how other people are responding to one. There will have to be a very accurate way of reading other people's responses, their body language, their vibrational reactivities to what is being proposed or what is happening, and an ability to very sensitively respond verbally and non-verbally in order to maintain a balance of direction and of, let's say, the negotiation of the development of a situation that cannot be fully controlled, and nor should one attempt to control, but to allow the blossoming of that which is healthy within the situation and the pruning of that which is unhealthy, or the elimination of that. But that requires tremendous discernment and skill of leadership and of the ability to cooperate, harmonize, accommodate, manage situations of pressure and conflict in ways that there can be a mediation of those dissonances that are leftovers from the oppressive system that everyone has traces of in their consciousness. And so if all of these skill sets and developments of power and righteousness, and I don't mean self-righteousness, but real righteousness that brings the power of the source through one as an instrument who has the ability to ground a group, a community, a revolutionary development, and has the ability to share and encourage the blossoming and the development of other power centers, so that there can be an independent continuation and replication, and even an improvement and upgrading in the way that the revolutionary situation takes off, using all of the information and the energy that had been developed in the past in order to keep building upon it and developing, rather than rigidly imitating and becoming a traditional devotee or a follower of some sort, whether it's of Karl Marx or Mao or Ramana or anyone else. It has to be a complete new dispensation of truthfulness that comes from the source, and that has to be through a self-authorization that comes through a complete elimination of the egoic identifications that create a positionality, an egocentricity, and an impossibility of an absolute recognition of the perfection of the whole that is being born as a new world, as a new order, as a new manifestation of being, without any particular use of the mind to try to control or determine the future of that newly born system or divine order in an optimal case.